Welcome to the Security Cocktail Hour. I'm Joe Patty.
Adam Roth.
Adam, today we're back to your favorite subject, drones, and we have an Uber expert, Matt Sloane. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. Good to see you.
You're one of those people who hasn't just gotten into it. I got into it a couple days ago. I finally bought a drone, so I'm like, I got to see how these things actually work. I immediately crashed it into a tree.
Sounds like
But
you need some good training. I know a guy.
I do need some training.
Yeah.
Matt, you are significantly more experienced in this than I am, or even Adam, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been doing it for 13 years now. I've been in the drone industry. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, but I'll tell you that when we first got started doing this back in 2014, I we were like duct taping GoPros to these things because the cameras were so bad. So we've come a long way in that short period of time for sure.
Well, I think the cameras have gotten better and cheaper too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll never forget. I was we do a lot of work with public safety, primarily work with public safety, and this was, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. I said we really need a thermal camera on these things, and I sat in a room with a product engineer from DJI. I said, look, I really think we need to put a thermal camera on these things, and he was like, how many do you think we can sell? You think we can sell 10,000 of them? I was like, I mean, not me personally, but yeah, I think people will buy them. Now it's like if you have a drone without a thermal camera on it, it's like a crime against humanity. So
Especially what people not realizing that, back in the day, drones really flew during the day, not at night. And now drones are actually, I'm not saying they're not a day thing. They're definitely a day thing, but they definitely enhance night, especially if they don't have a helicopter or aviation program. It goes without saying having a thermal program, but Matt, you're speaking to a guy that sat there and said, maybe I want to. I was finding the cables that were USB-C, the HDMI that were made for a certain vendor that I can plug in and do RTMP to RTSP on my NVR, my network video recorder, because I wanted to ingest it without having to pay for licensing for software to track. So, it really depends on what you want to do, but you can get some enhancements anyway. And especially like a company like Skyfire AI, I'm sure you find ways of detecting things. People are looking for smoke detection, they're looking for fire detection, they're looking for gunfire, they're looking for aliens from another planet, possibly Mars.
yeah, that one we haven't found the right detector for that one yet, but we're still
Soon,
working on it,
soon.
but it's coming. Yeah, well, I mean, once these UFO files get opened up, we'll know exactly what we're looking for. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the obvious the daylight camera obviously you need, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose of having a drone. The thermal camera very important, and then there's lots of other stuff coming out now too that are I would consider not just cameras, but just different types of sensors. So it could be, new chem bio detection, gas detection, magnetometers. So, there's a couple of projects that we've been sort of on the periphery of, where, they're looking for old, gas lines and things like that. So you can actually detect metal in the ground. There's ground penetrating radar. There's, RF detection payloads. So like if you're looking for a lost hiker and you need to go look for, a cell phone ping or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there now. Of course, every time you add a sensor, you're adding, major pucker factor to the flying experience and about, $50,000 to the bill if you crash the thing. But, it's pretty amazing what you can do with the drone. So, we tell people too, the drone's like a tractor, right? It's only as good as whatever you put on it. So, I mean, it's that's the part everybody likes to talk about is, what drone did you get? But drone's really not that important as long as it flies. That's the key factor.
Okay, so I got to say then, it's like an AI agent. You need tools because now we can use the AI hashtag.
Well, it's on the edge.
So we're good.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead, Adam.
that's
I got
exactly
the
it.
AI plug-in.
It has to be on the edge to really have the level of processing. Everyone talks about like, yeah, we can add AI, and I'm not saying you can't, from the cloud, but the cloud is great too, and everyone's doing that. But if you can add it somehow or another, communicating from the edge to the cloud and having both, that's really the way to go. The question I have for you, Matt, is when is the sensor coming out for a wireless access point? Because that's the good the rogue detection, the purple teaming, the red teaming. I mean, that's really cool. We had a podcaster, a guest that came on about a couple episodes ago, and he was talking about when we in New York City there was a DJI Maverick sitting out somebody's office space, and they had the access point, And I know that you can use the access point to do a man-in-the-middle attack with an LTE, sending that signal back, into the LTE cloud, internet. So it's really cool how you can do command and control. Amazing things
Yeah.
these days.
Well, and it's amazing how you're seeing things move, right? Because originally, everything was point to point, right? So you would stand there with a remote, and then the drone would fly as far as you could fly it until you lost signal or until you reached, the end of line of sight. If we're being legal about it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, you have to make disclaimer. You must maintain under FAA Part 107
Yes.
visual line of sight.
Yes, unless you get a waiver, which we've done plenty of. But yeah,
Yes.
for now. So it's point to point, and that's a wireless signal, no problem. I mean, it's 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz. But when we start to get into real thing, like real line beyond line of sight, where we're doing things like long range package delivery, power line inspection, if we're starting to fly organs across town from one hospital to another hospital, those things, you need more than just a point to point wireless connection. So we see a lot of drone companies now are using LTE, and so we have the ability to kind of control that drone independently of the base station. And there's a new drone that just got released last week that's got Starlink built into it.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's all kinds of really exciting stuff happening. And I think what we've seen, the evolution is that the graphic where you've got the hunched over ape, and then they start to get taller and taller as you kind of that's where we're at right now in the drone industry. We started with the guy standing here with the remote, and then now we're moving to the LTE, and then to the satellite connectivity. Eventually, well, we have, ability now to even just put, here's a flight plan, send the drone out, it goes and does the flight plan and comes back, and you're not giving it any control signals. So, I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff coming. Obviously, the military folks have had some of this stuff for, probably 2 decades before we even get our hands on it.
And then we also had another gentleman, Che Bolden, that's coming out in episode. He was, from my understanding, one of the people that brought military drones drones into the military,
Mhm.
and that's what we talk about, right? Autonomous drones, like commercial drones, are now becoming more autonomous. I'm not saying they're not autonomous now. Even with the FAA 107 waiver, you can go beyond visual line of sight, but it still requires somebody attending to it. Though there also is something new where you can manage multiple drones with one pilot, which is
Mhm.
recently. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you look at Waymos and there's other vehicles, uh, that whole goal is to control autonomous vehicles, more than one, without having to worry about it. So if you're having people on the ground with autonomous vehicles, I think it's safe to say we could figure out how to do it in the sky as well. Though eventually you're going to look up and you're going to say, wow, there's 1,000 drones up there. I'm getting my Amazon package. I'm getting my lunch. I'm getting, my fries.
Well, you guys wouldn't know anything about that in New Jersey, right? I have heard that there's no mysterious drones flying around in the skies over New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, please. It's funny though, because I am, like I said, I just got a drone and Adam's teaching me all this stuff. So I'm like, oh, let me look up the rules, see if you can do it. Tell me there are all these restrictions. You got to be careful. And like everything else, everything's illegal in New Jersey. No parks in my county. You can't do it. All this stuff. So I guess I'm in my backyard. Maybe I'll annoy the
Yeah.
neighbors.
Yeah.
But Matt, so when you talk about autonomous stuff, I mean, there are many different levels of autonomy, including in cars, but I suppose with drones too. What are the levels? What's legal? I mean, are we at the point where it's supervised, where you're truly giving this thing a flight plan and just letting it go? Where are we these
Yeah.
days?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's not really a technology problem. It's more of a regulatory issue right now. And so, under Part 107, which is the rules that we all fly under, public safety has a different framework, but even under that framework, there is a mandate to have a pilot flying the aircraft, right? So there is no autonomy. There is semi-autonomy. So I can say, hey, go fly to this address, hit go, but I'm still responsible for what the drone's doing. I still have a controller in my hand. I might be standing outside, or I might be inside with the PlayStation controller in my hand doing it. But the point is, I'm still in control of that aircraft. And that's what the law requires under Part 107. Part 108, which is in the works right now, so they, without boring you to death with FAA rulemaking, they put out a proposed rule last year. We all commented on it. Now they're going to come out with a final rule later this year. Part 108 actually prefers autonomy over human operator. And so it says autonomy first with a human overseeing the system. And the reason that is is because we're trying to allow for things like package delivery and medical device delivery and air taxis and all that good stuff. And so, at the end of the day, as much as we hate to admit it, the autonomy is probably going to be better at flying the drone than we are. And so, we obviously still need the ability to oversee and, intercede if we need to. But Adam, you talked about the one-to-many waivers that are coming out now. You can't physically, like, the mental task saturation is too high for you to manually fly more than one drone at a time. And so we need, increasing levels of autonomy to be able to handle that. You think about, when we first started, in the public safety space, there was, I don't know, 5 or 10 agencies that were doing it. And, we'd go into an agency and we'd say, hey, check out this drone thing. And they'd be like, it's a toy. I don't need it. And then like a year or two later, everybody was like, oh yeah, I've heard about these things. These could actually be really useful. And then, a year or two after that, everybody was like, I gotta have one. And then now it's gotten to the point where, like, if you don't have one, you're almost seen as like negligent. Like, there's a tool out there that you could use to save lives, more efficiently. And why don't you have it? Right. And so I've been in this industry long enough to have seen that transformation. Now, because of that, and everybody sort of expects, like, it's not if you're going to get a drone program, it's when you're going to get a drone program in your agency. With thousands and thousands and thousands more people operating these things, like, there just aren't enough pilots. And so, we've got to have increasing levels of autonomy. We The AI part of Skyfire AI is, we're working on some really cool software stuff that enables autonomy and multi-ship formations, which you might call swarm,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I tend to stay away from that word because it's terrifying. But if and I'm not talking about like a swarm of drones coming after you, but I am talking about, like, you go to central New Jersey into the wetlands area and you've got somebody lost or missing. Instead of having one drone cover 1,000 acres, you could have 10 drones, each covering 100 acres. And in the same amount of time, or in a shorter amount of time, you could cover, a lot more ground. So that's I think where the industry is heading, and at breakneck speed, like everything else in technology.
And I'll add to that, like, a couple of things. To step back to the whole thing about the mysterious autonomous drones. What people don't realize is that drones really don't fly longer than 47 minutes at any one time, approximately, right? So if a drone is up there, if it's really up there for long periods of time, it's either probably manned or it's also fossil fuels, or something like that. And people don't realize that if it's fossil fuels, we're talking about drones higher priced than cars, 30, 40, 50,000, which means it's government. I mean,
Oh
whatever.
no, every drone, no, Adam, every drone is now more than 30, 40, fifty
No,
thousand.
I know,
You're talking more than 150,000.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
for
what
sure.
people were saying in New York City and in New Jersey was that these drones were like DJI drones that cost about $1,000, and people didn't realize that the level of organization, there had to be an operation center. They were coordinated drones. I would venture to guess that any one of these drones was hundreds of thousands of dollars each if they really do meet the
Yeah.
criteria everybody was talking about.
Well, and I'll tell you, we work with a lot of three-letter agencies. So,
Yeah, of course.
I wouldn't say we were on the inside during all that stuff, but we definitely were, talking to people who knew what they were talking about. And I'm not telling you anything that hasn't already been made public,
Of
but
course.
most of the stuff that people were seeing wasn't a drone. Most of it was airplanes. And, it's funny too, because if you really think about it, most people don't look up ever. Right. I mean, I'm a
Hmm.
pilot, so I look every time I hear
I
something,
always look up.
I'm looking around. But most people don't. It's actually pretty funny because we run these drone first responder programs, right? So we're actually out flying on behalf of police departments, responding to 911 calls, and like the drone's like 400 feet above somebody, and we're watching them do stupid stuff, and you're like, how's this guy never look up? Like, I mean, he could probably even hear the damn thing, but they don't think about it. So I think a lot of what happened in New Jersey was people don't normally look up. And there's a lot of small airports in New Jersey, and people are flying, Cessnas out of those airports. You've got 3 international airports nearby, so flight paths and people lining up for airports to fly into Newark and LaGuardia and Kennedy. And so I think people just, didn't notice that there were that many things in the airspace. I think it did come out that there was a military drone contractor who was testing some stuff,
Yeah, there
which
was.
probably, yeah, started the the hysteria. But for the most part it was airplanes. In fact, an FBI friend of ours said there was actually one report that ended up coming back that it was Jupiter. that what they saw in the sky was Jupiter. It's like 300 million miles away. And they're like, there's a drone in the sky. Like, no, it's a freaking planet. It's a quarter billion miles away. Don't worry about it. You'll be
Yeah.
safe.
And then the other thing I was going to talk about is what people, again, what we're not realizing is drones are an extension of a network, right? That network, every sensor allows you to have almost a crowdsourcing. So if you have a swarm of drones, and swarms are actually nice too. They make little things in the sky, and they do like little presentations and stuff. So
Yeah, when they're light shows, it's okay. When they're,
yeah,
Yeah, I've
yeah.
seen that.
So
IEDs, they're not
so
so
the
much.
point I'm making is that these are all coordinated. There are back end sensors. There's a lot of intelligence that you can get. And yeah, there are hikers that have been found by drones. There are AEDs that have been sent to somebody's house on a 911 call to save their life. There are rafts that were thrown out into the water at beaches by lifeguards that control these drones that were able to save people's lives. So there's a lot of good stuff to it, but people have to be cognizant and have to be safe. A lot of these drones that are flying, people are not taking responsibility for them. They're doing crazy things. And even in New York City, while 400 feet might be the maximum altitude that you're allowed to go, you could be standing, even if you have a permit in New York City, you have to have a permit in New York City to fly under law enforcement. Your top might be 100 feet where you are, and then 2 blocks away it's 300 feet. You got to know where the boundaries are and how far you can go.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is we can have all these rules. We can have, there's remote ID now, so you're supposed to be able to, be broadcasting. It's basically a license plate for your drone. You can have all these rules, but don't forget that the bad actors don't follow the rules, right? So, we had the privilege of doing Overwatch coverage for the Super Bowl in Atlanta a couple years ago. And they had a 30-mile wide temporary flight restriction in place, and they did press conferences, and they said, "Don't fly your drones. This is going to be a problem for you." We still had 57 incursions into the temporary flight restriction over 4 days. So people, like 99% of the people that they went and stopped were like, "Oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Like, whatever. And they said, "Listen, we get it. Don't do it again." A couple of them were journalists who should have known better. Nobody was a nefarious actor, so that's good. But I mean, you look at what's happening overseas in Ukraine, in Iran, and in Russia, and all. I mean, in Saudi Arabia. I mean, there's people using drones for nefarious purposes, and I hate to be this guy, but like you know, it's not a matter of if, but when somebody does something, nefarious here with a drone, then we got to be prepared for that. So, as much as I'm a pro drone guy, I also do a lot of work in the counter-UAS space, where we're trying to detect and mitigate, drones that aren't supposed to be there, and sort out the wheat from the chaff. So, we've got World Cup coming up, 104 matches in all three countries in North America. The federal law enforcement folks we've been talking to are like, yeah, it's basically like, we got 104 Super Bowls in 6 weeks that we got to deal with. And so, yeah, there's going to be, there's almost $1 billion in counter UAS funding that's come down from DHS. They've opened up a counter UAS training school here in Huntsville, where they're bringing those agencies from those cities, pardon me, to train them for that eventuality. So yeah, I mean, we're getting serious about it, finally, but it's super important. The other thing I wanted to kind of hit on too, you talked about defibrillators on drones. So I don't know if you guys have seen this thing. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
called an Avive AED, but we actually are working on with a couple of clients on flying these things around and being able to deliver them in 2.5 minutes to a cardiac arrest victim. So yeah, there's all kinds of interesting stuff happening.
It's really interesting when you talk about the counter drones and stuff, because a lot of what we do in cybersecurity is looking at traffic is easy. Looking at what is going on, it's easy. The tough part is, distinguishing between what's malicious and what isn't. And, the attackers use that. They use the same tools everyone else uses. They do what looks like normal stuff. Do you have the same thing in drones? And I mean, do you have like behavioral detection and stuff? Because I can't imagine for, fight for, like you say, 104 games, if they're going to be chasing down everyone who doesn't realize they're within a certain distance of a stadium and is flying their drone around, I can't imagine that they can really cover that legitimately.
Well, they certainly couldn't before the most recent legislation. So just backstory here. Up until very recently, the only groups that had the authority to mitigate suspect drones was the Department of Justice. So it was, FBI and the associated agencies. Department of Energy has the ability to do it over nuclear plants, and Department of War has the ability to do it over their facilities, and of course, outside the United States. But really, inside the country, it was only the Department of Justice. The FBI gets requests for hundreds of events a year to be able to provide that counter UAS coverage. And frankly, they just couldn't do it all. So they would, of course, do things like Super Bowl and Indy 500, the big tier one events. But when they saw what was coming down the pike with FIFA and the World Cup, they were like, "Look, we've got to decentralize this a little bit," and they've been very hesitant to do that up until this point. What happened was they passed legislation that said, okay, we're going to move this core capability from the Department of Justice down to the state and local level. But anybody who has the authority to do this has to come through the FBI first. So they've got to come to the school. They established the school here in Huntsville, where the FBI's counter UAS team is based. So you come through the school. It's like a 2 to 3 week school, and you get the all the training and everything. And then they released a big grant program for the cities to actually go out and buy this technology. So we've decentralized the ability just from FBI down to the cities themselves, which is we'll see how it works, right? I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic, but there's a couple levels of counter UAS too. So obviously there's detection, right? So we've been doing this for years. People have these aeroscope systems and other passive detection systems up on stadiums, and you can see a drone from 50 miles away, and you can tell the serial number and the location of the drone, the operator, and the home point. So that's passive detection. Then there's a couple types of mitigation as well. So you can, shoot an EMP at the drone and, sort of immediately deactivate it. Well, the problem with that is it's going to fall out of the sky
Yeah,
and it's probably going to hit somebody. So
Oh,
we got to be really
yeah.
careful about that. There's other active mitigation, like you can actually fly a drone that's dangling a net and,
yeah, yeah,
capture the other drone with it. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a great YouTube video. It's called Johnny Drone Hunter, and he's got like, I mean, it looks like a bazooka on his
yeah, yeah,
shoulder, but it's actually like a drone gun.
yeah.
All of that exists, so you can jam the signal, you can take over the signal, and you can actually tell the drone to go
Land
to its home. Well, you can tell it to land
RTH.
where it is. You can tell it to go to its home point, or you can tell it to go to a render safe location. The problem with telling it to go to its home point is overseas, we've seen these terrorists are actually programming the home point as the target
Yeah,
location.
yeah.
And so they make it return to home and it returns to the target and does what it's supposed to do. So, it's a double-edged sword, right? You got to really think about it. So I'll never forget, there was an event going on in a major US city, unrelated to drones, but, it was a very tense time in that city. And I got a call from the head of the drone team in that city's police department. And they said, I got a drone flying over my sniper positions. Like, what do I do about it? And I said, well, you're gonna have to call the FBI, call the FAA. He said, well, can't I just throw a Gatorade bottle at it? And I was like, well, you
It's
could.
actually kind of illegal too, right?
No,
Because
it's
you get
it's
down.
it's very illegal. So I said, listen, man, I look, it's a life safety thing. I'll do you a favor. Let me call the FBI. Let me call the FAA on your behalf, because I know you're on the roof with the snipers. So I called those guys and I talked to the FBI first, and they said, listen, if it's a life safety situation, he's got to do what he's got to do. But also, just keep in mind that if it falls out of the sky and hits a bus full of nuns, it's going to be a problem, right? And then I talked to the FAA and
And
they said, listen, it's life safety. He's got to do what he's got to do. But if it falls out of the sky and hits a bus full of nuns, I'm like, what does this bus full of nuns think? Are they teach you that in Fed school on day
yeah,
one?
is that on the
But
test?
right. I mean, but the point is, like, yeah, I mean, you can do it. You're going to get in a lot of trouble for it. And the FAA looks at it as, if you take if you take a drone out of the sky, they look at it the same as taking a 747 out of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sky.
And
If you
we,
jam the signal, that's an FCC violation. It's a
mhm.
wiretap issue. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a problem.
And we should say when you talk about it hitting a bus or like landing on the windshield, these are not the tiny little ones you see in Best Buy. These
It
are
could be. It could be.
big
It could
size
be.
things, right?
Yeah, it could be. I mean,
Joe.
the one
Yeah,
one we fly regularly for public safety purposes is, 18 pounds or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
So, it falls 14, or 400 feet out of the sky as dead weight. Yeah, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, it'll
yeah.
hurt. It'll go through a windshield. It'll, freak someone out on the road if it happens in front of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Joe, imagine being somebody that has like 40 acres of land, right? and they can and they're allowed to protect their land, and they're walking around and they're carrying a rifle or a shotgun, and they see a drone and it's safe to shoot, and they go to shoot it, it's still illegal. Like you can't even shoot a drone. You can shoot a person on your land, but you can't shoot a drone
Yeah,
flying
it's an
over.
aircraft. It's an aircraft.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
no, that's the same as shooting a 747 out of the sky, as far as the FAA is concerned. In fact, there was actually a case in Kentucky where a guy he thought that somebody was spying on his daughter sunbathing in the backyard, so he took a shotgun and knocked the drone out of the sky. And not only did he get a huge fine, but he had to replace the guy's drone too. So, and I think went to jail.
Did he have to provide pictures of his daughter too to like
No,
do
probably
that?
not.
No.
Yeah, it's when you get to the federal level, whether it's FCC, and actually some of the issues with drones are not FAA, the FCC.
FCC,
That,
yeah.
that's another whole story in itself. Like the whole thing is, if you're over 250 grams, you're required to do an ADSB out, right? That's what it is. Um,
No, there's no ADSB out for drones.
I
No,
say,
you just have to register your drone if it's over
oh,
250 grams. Yeah.
because drones do ADSB out, don't they?
They do not actually. No, in fact, the
Yeah, but they
FAA
don't do ADSB in.
they do ADSB in. So that what we're talking about here is the ability for a drone pilot to be able to see airplane transponders. The FAA has determined it's okay for you to get that in data so you can see where the planes are,
Oh,
but we
I
can't broadcast out.
misunderstood then. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it was
you
the
can't do
opposite.
out. No, because they don't want. If you think about, how many drones are in the air, and I fly small airplanes too. So if I'm up in an airplane and I'm flying around and I see all these little dots on my screen for ADS-B pings, that's going to confuse my situational awareness. And so, but it's a conversation that's still ongoing. Now, what they're talking about now is not all airplanes are even required to have ADS-B unless you're flying in controlled airspace. And so they're actually talking about changing that. The airplane community hates it because there's a lot of cost that goes into that. But if I don't know everything that's flying in the sky, airplane or helicopter wise, it's really tough for me to avoid it if I don't know that it's there. It's also, you guys probably remember the tragic accident that happened at Reagan Airport a year ago ish.
Yeah, the helicopter.
Helicopter versus that regional
Mhm.
jet.
It was
And,
happened the other day. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, no, it happened, right, exactly. And so, that was a transponder issue, right? That military helicopter wasn't broadcasting ADS-B. The airplane didn't see it, and they were on landing, so it was this responsibility of the helicopter to see and avoid the airplane. But they didn't have their ADS-B on, so nobody knew. And that military helicopters, I understand why they don't want to be what they call electronically conspicuous. But you're flying in domestic airspace. There's going to be all these drones up in the air. Now we're going to have air taxis and package delivery and all that kind of stuff. And so we just, you got to know where everybody is, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because, obviously the military, they're going to do what they think they need to
Yeah,
do at times
yeah,
that makes sense. But especially when you're talking about domestically, it kind of seems to me like that's almost like a jurisdictional thing also. And that's what I started thinking about when you said, oh, the FBI started delegating down and letting states and localities do it. As soon as I hear that, knowing the way things work around here, I think, oh my God, it's going to be a mess. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's why, they come down here, and this is not a like online webinar that they're taking. They make them spend 2 weeks in Huntsville. It's a great city. I love it. But if you're from out of town, it's a big commitment to spend 2 weeks on here. So, um, they take it very seriously, and the FBI puts you through a boot camp essentially. And it's right now the only, I think there's I don't know, 17 or 18 cities that are going through the classes right now. And it's all the World Cup cities, have a representative here. It's they're limiting it, right? They're not just letting anybody do it. But and then the gear to be able to do it is very expensive too. So that's another sort of gatekeeping thing is, you have to have the money to be able to buy the jamming and mitigating devices.
So you basically saying I can't come to the class. I get it.
You cannot come to. They won't even let me come to the class. I swung by for an hour. It was very nice of our friends at the FBI to show us what they're up to. So
We talked a bit about where things are going and some of the changes that might be coming down. But, I'm curious to know where things are now because, like I said, Matt, you do a lot with law enforcement, public safety, and everything. And I get the feeling that there are a lot more drones in the air than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think most of them probably aren't doing anything official. I mean, if you, we have agencies we work with that have drone detection capability because that is legal. So they just, they know how many drones are in the air, and it's hundreds a day probably. But like I would say, probably 95% of them are just, hey, I want to go fly my drone around and get a cool picture of the leaves changing, or I want to go get a picture of that waterfall or whatever. Um, so I think it's still the majority of them still are hobbyists and people doing real estate stuff, doing roof inspections and that kind of thing. But I think that's changing. So as Walmart's doing package delivery now in several cities, Amazon's doing package delivery. There's a couple of areas around the country where they're trialing things like organ delivery and medication delivery. We're involved in a project up in Michigan where we're going to be doing medication delivery back and forth between pharmacies, and some emergency response type stuff, and then you get disaster response stuff. So it's getting busier, and then we're going to add this whole other layer of air taxis. Uber Air and all these, Joby and some of these other big companies are starting to add this stuff. So it's going to get congested, that's for sure. I'm not sure. I don't know how you guys feel. I haven't even done a Waymo or a autonomous car yet. I'm not sure I want to get in an air taxi.
I've been in Arizona multiple times for Waymos. I have not gotten into one, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you this:
Yeah.
if you what people do not realize, they think once you have an FAA 107, you're free to fly anywhere. A lot of jurisdictions do not let you fly. Like in New York, you cannot fly a drone legally anywhere but one of the 4 or 5 designated New York City parks. If you're flying it commercially, you have to get a landing and takeoff permit, and you have to have insurance, and you have to put up signs conspicuously to let the people know. If you're in New Jersey and you're doing it for surveillance, you have to have a New Jersey Consumer Affairs license to allow you to fly because you're using it surveillance. It's a security alarm, a security license from the New Jersey Department of Consumer Affairs. And I can only imagine other states and municipalities, they require above and beyond of what an FAA 107 is. And even if you have an FAA 107, you still have to be careful because you have to know the airspace. Everyone thinks, oh, I can just fly. Meanwhile, there's a helicopter coming out of nowhere that's
Yeah.
on the flight path, and you have restricted airspace. People don't look.
Yeah. Well, and even in places where you are allowed to fly, you still have helicopters doing stuff that is terrifying. So, we run the DFR program here in Huntsville, and we have a hospital downtown, and so helicopters are coming in all the time. They're on ADSB. We see them coming. They're allowed to be there. It's a life safety mission, and yet we still don't have a great way of deconflicting other than, hey, I see a helicopter, bring the drone down. So, we have a long way to go as a country. And, it's interesting because, there's all these municipalities up in the Northeast, especially. It's not so much down here in Alabama, but that prevent you from doing these things. The FAA actually controls the airspace. And so anybody who says, hey, you can't fly over this town, the FAA will take you to court on that. They'll take the town to court. You can fly wherever the FAA says you can fly, and you can't fly wherever the
Really?
FAA says you can't fly. But you can't take off and land from public property if that municipality says so. That's why you said you need a takeoff and landing permit. They can't say you need a permit to fly over that town in New Jersey. They can say you can't take off from our property, but they can't say
Yeah,
you
New
can't
York
fly
City.
over.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this. That's
Yeah,
really interesting because I looked up, my town doesn't have restrictions, but the county says you can't take off from the county parks. And
right.
there is one not too far away from me. So are you saying that if I have the drone take off, like from my house, from my property, I can then fly over and fly it in the park?
Yeah.
And if,
Not only can you do that, but if you got in trouble for doing that, the FAA would be on your side.
is
So
that right?
it,
Wow.
it's the
I
opposite.
might do that just to tick them off. That's cool.
Yeah,
It's the opposite in New York City. In New York
yeah,
City, you're only allowed to fly in public parks that are designated.
yeah.
In New York City, you can't take off even from your own private property and fly. And keep in mind, you're not allowed to fly over people anyway,
Right,
majority of the time. So if you're flying over somebody, you've already violated the FAA 107 laws, unless it's a contained space and they have a and they They know that there's going part of purchasing the ticket is that they know that they're going to be subject to that and blah blah blah. There's a whole bunch of rules and laws behind that, but you cannot fly over moving vehicles. You cannot fly over a highway. Anywhere there's a person, you and I can be wrong, but you're not really supposed to be flying over them.
No, no, you're not wrong. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a gray area in the sense that if you're moving across people, they actually consider that incidental contact. It's a
Yeah,
whole thing. It's not that important for purposes of your audience, but the point is, what they're trying to avoid is people flying over big open air assemblies, like, protests and concerts and things like that. So, generally speaking, try not to fly over people. If the thing falls out of the sky, it's
which
going
is
to be a bad
legally
day.
and lawfully allowed for
Right,
the law enforcement agencies to do,
right,
which is exactly what
yeah,
they're doing.
right.
But it's amazing. So let me ask you this, right? From a Skyfire AI standpoint, like obviously your goal is to do detection, and I think we kind of spoke about, and people have come to me before as in my background in security surveillance, like, hey Adam, I want to be able to detect a fire on my roof, and we know AI agents are now capable of kind of doing that now, right? We want to see smoke. We want to see, and smoke obviously clogs the lens on purpose. Not on purpose, but it'll clog the lens and you'll know it's smoke. But what detections, if you're allowed to speak of, are really cool and interesting that are going to change what we see?
Yeah, I mean, just one quick point on that too. So the thermal cameras actually can see through smoke. They can't see, so they can see through things that you can't, but they can't see through some things that you can. So they can't see through glass. They can't see through water. And so, people have this opinion that like we deal with this all the time when agencies go out and do like public information about starting a drone program. People think that like these drones can see through your house like predator style and see where you are in your house and you're moving around. Like that's not a thing.
You don't have
Um,
that sensor, Matt? I had that sensor.
oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, let me know where you got it. I'll pick one up. I'm sure the military does, but no commercial drones have that capability. So yeah, because of the way thermal imaging works, you can't see through glass or through water. But by the way, just an interesting aside, we had a client who ran a call once where a suspect they were chasing actually jumped in the river. And you couldn't see him in the river, but you could see his head bobbing up and down every time it came out of the water. So it's kind of fun. But yeah, so some of the new stuff that's coming out that I think is fascinating. I think the gas detection, optical gas detection.
What's that?
Yeah, one of the problems with gas detection by drone is that the propellers move a lot of air. So
Yeah,
if you fly a drone into like a gas cloud, it's going to disperse the gas, and so it's very hard to get accurate readings on that with regular gas
EPM.
detectors that
Yeah,
actually sniff the air. But they have these sensors called optical OGI, optical gas imaging, and so you can actually look towards a gas cloud, and it'll tell you that it's there and what it is, and parts per million and all that. So I
yeah.
think
Just has
that's
space on
fascinating.
density. You're able to do density.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's
so that's
amazing.
that's pretty cool. There's a lot of I'm fascinated by things like ground penetrating radar. These are big sensors, and they're cool for detecting, minerals and all that kind of stuff. But they're also, if you think about
Buried
um,
treasure. I'm kidding.
buried treasure or buried bodies too. And
Yeah, yeah.
so, like one of our guys actually came from 22 years at the FBI, and he said, and ran their drone program, and he said, you think that we're mostly like kicking indoors and doing cool SWAT stuff, but he's like a lot of our job at the drone program back in the day was looking for disturbed earth and buried bodies and stuff like that, and kidnapping cases. So there's those are, I think, interesting. um, the RF detection, I think, is really interesting.
Oh,
So how
that's
do we
cool.
know? Like, can we find a cell phone that's pinging? If we got a lost hiker, and they say, "I have no idea where I am." You say, "All right, cool. We'll come out and find your cell phone ping." Or there's a thing, I don't know if you guys have heard of, called Project Lifesaver, and it's for kids on the spectrum and people with Alzheimer's. They
Yeah,
get
yeah,
like
of
a
course.
wristband that
They
they
wear
can
the
wear.
belts. They have the belts. My,
Yeah,
my,
or
my
belts.
friend's kid
Yeah,
has that.
yeah. And so there's a way that you can actually detect those by drone. So I mean, there's all kinds of interesting stuff. You talked about wireless access points. If you think about during a disaster, when the cell networks are down, can you use the drone as a cell repeater? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
so stuff like that, where you can do mesh networks, flying mesh networks, and things like that. So, and like I said, the drone is only as good as the sensor or payload that you put on it. So.
So I was having a conversation with Joe, and when that woman was kidnapped in Arizona, I said to Joe, I said, like, I don't want to go into personal family history, but someone in my family has a defibrillator, and actually that defibrillator was clocked up uh, without their knowledge.
Mm.
So they end up having problems with like almost like a CHF, congestion heart failure. But I said to Joe, I said, look, that woman has a pacemaker. They can detect it by putting sensors on the drone. A day later, they did it. I was like, Joe, see? But obviously, they didn't find her. But you have to be in close proximity, whether it's like Zigbee or Bluetooth or any of those small contact signals. And that's great for finding people that have medical devices embedded. But it's like, but let's be honest, it's like doing a needle in a haystack. But I'd rather do a needle in a haystack than not do it at all.
Well, and if you have an idea of where somebody might be, like, hey, we know they're somewhere in this, in this,
Vicinity.
couple block radius or whatever, it can be useful. I get calls all the time from people who are like, "Hey, my dog got out 6 days ago. Can you bring a thermal drone and help?" I'm like, "No, like there's no way you're gonna find that. Like, I feel terrible for you. I'm so sorry. We
But
all
they
love
might
our
be able to
pets."
find the chip in the dog. But the cost
But
to
even
do this.
Well, and even if you've ever, if you've ever taken a dog to the vet to get, they got to take the reader and like it's got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah. It
right
has
up
to be
next to the thing.
extremely close vicinity.
Yeah,
I mean, but I do know this. From an RF standpoint, the capability, and we're not going to do that on a drone. But you're able to intensify your signal by using parabolic and everything else. But okay, I know people love dogs just as much as humans, and I know humans, and they won't even do it for humans.
yeah,
The
right.
cost, and it's not that it's all about cost, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to absorb that cost. But obviously, if it's your family member, you want them to be found.
Oh,
So
yeah,
there's a balance.
yeah,
If they have the
that-
means and the money to do it, they should do it.
yeah. Yeah, well, and I hear a train behind one of you guys, and
Yeah, that's me.
there. I mean, the long range inspection capabilities that we can do now with drones is
Oh
super
yeah,
cool
for the
too. So
tracks. Yeah,
yeah, go check out the tracks ahead of the trains and
I was
power
involved in
lines.
something like that too, where they end up putting camera sensors on the tracks themselves to
Yeah,
bring signal back to look at the undercarriage, and even some of the undercarriages had the ability to detect the cars themselves through RFID. So people want to be able to inspect thousands and thousands of tracks. And this is a false multiplier using drones as well. So if you don't have the
yeah,
capability already embedded into the tracks themselves, using drones to see that a track is not physically in good shape, and this has
yeah,
been a thing for over 20 years already that I'm aware of. So now drones are a force multiplier.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I can tell you, at least here in Jersey, you don't need drones or exotic technology to see where the train infrastructure is falling apart. It's pretty obvious. But I
I
know what
grew
you
up.
mean.
I grew up in the Northeast. Yeah, I'm used to. There's the overhead lines all over the place, all the SEPTA lines and everything too. So yeah,
So, it's funny because at one point we're talking about magnetometers, and I know that certain government agencies, they have certain devices that they can detect a gun 20, 30 feet away.
yeah,
One of my friends was assigned to a detail, and he didn't have the pin on for an agency, and they saw him and they grabbed him and put him up against the wall. He goes, "What are you doing? I'm a detective." He's like, "You have a gun on you. You're not identified."
yeah.
So if they can do that with their own detectors or handheld, imagine what they could do with drones.
Yeah, honestly, like we're barely scratching the surface, right now. And I mean, the innovative stuff that I've seen, we've worked with over 1,000 agencies in the last, decade and a half. They've done some incredibly creative things that, we're just every time they tell us these stories, we're like, oh my God, I never even thought of that. Like we had this, it's a sad story, unfortunately, but there was a story of a guy who was committing suicide and they didn't know, kind of what they were walking into. They didn't know it was a suicide. So the guy was like in a tent or something. They actually flew the drone into the tent and saw what was going on before they sent the officers in there. So I mean, there's all kinds of indoor uses of drones too. Like there was another a very well-reported example in Atlanta where there was a murder suspect barricaded in an apartment. They sent the drone in. That's safer for the suspect because he doesn't get shot by the SWAT team. It's safer for the SWAT team because they don't have to put themselves in harm's way. And they sent the robot to do the job, and the guy came out, with his hands up above his head. They used the speaker on the drone to be like, come out
Yes,
with your hands up. So I mean, it's pretty crazy. And the indoor tactical uses of drones, we unfortunately talk a lot about school shootings and things like that.
they're
And
doing that now. Launch
can
programs.
you, yeah, can you fly a drone inside and tase the guy or whatever? So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff coming out that I think is gonna be incredible.
The difference is
And
though,
now
if
you
you,
can order dog food delivered directly to your doorstep by drone. It'll just
I
drop
might
it out of
just
the
do it. And
sky.
I don't even have a dog. So what people don't also realize is there's a very, very big difference between FPV or first person view
Yeah,
drone flying than there is traditional commercial or hobbyist flown drive. I mean, I know FPV is also hobbyist, but the goal with an FPV is to use, for people who don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, is to use a headset so you can see it as if you are the drone, and you're using a kind of a different type of joystick controller than normal, and that allows you to fly a drone at high levels, high rates of speed. I'm not saying you can't fly a regular drone, but you're doing more tactical and more like,
yeah. It's a lot
like
more
almost like
manual flying.
skiing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the goal is that if you have an FPV or first person view and you're using the drone tactically, you break the window into the location. The issue obviously is that you should be on the same floor that you're putting the drone in. If you're not, then you have to find the stairs and get to the stairs, and they'll use an elevator and then get up the so control the elevator. But FPV is an amazing thing because that drone is usually safe. It usually has propeller guards to fly the drone in there, and you can get a lot of good communication, a lot of good situational awareness, and see exactly what's going on. I'm
Well, we
convinced,
see
Joe, there's a business in this.
Yeah.
this is the problem. There's so many businesses in this. It's hard to decide which one to do. But yeah, FPV stuff. I mean, you look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, they're
Yeah, yeah.
using, $100 FPV drones with a little bit of C4 on them and blowing up $100 million airplanes on a daily basis, or tanks. I mean, you see. I don't know if you guys have seen any of these videos, but these guys will you get this like crackly, staticky video, and it's like this tiny little, $150, $200 FPV drone, and it'll go just smash into a tank and blow the tank up, and it's like, man, that changed everything. And
Yeah.
the military is buying FPV drones and parts like it's going out of style, and they call them attritable drones, so basically disposable, and they're buying them by the hundreds of thousands. It's
So
it's unreal.
I'm doing because I like to show off and insert this here. I'm doing a doctorate on ethical cyber warfare, and the funny part about ethical cyber warfare, it's no different from drones. What people don't realize with drones, which is very similar to cyber warfare, is that you're far removed situationally from where the attack is going to happen most of the time. So I get it. You might be closer to where the drone is, but let's be honest. Even an FPV, even a $200 drone, you can place anywhere as long as you have communications to it and control it remotely. And what people don't realize is that you can cause incredible damage with very little effort these days with cyber warfare and drones. And they really are very much aligned into the same technology. At the same time, I also get it that with drones and cyber warfare, you can do a certain type of damage that's temporary without causing casualty to humans and to infrastructure. So, from a good standpoint, like if you have a drone and you're flying that drone over maybe a communication center, you can render that communications incapable for a short period of time to achieve your objectives and then reestablish it, hopefully not causing electrical outages for longer period of times where people will die because they don't get medical equipment or medical or breathing apparatuses. So there is a lot of good to it, and there's bad for the threat actors.
Yeah. Oh, well, no. I mean, and again, that's the thing where I think we're living in a little bit of a bubble here in the U.S. because we haven't seen uh, high rates of drone terrorism stuff. But I mean, let's be honest, like it's happening all everywhere else in the world. So there was a story up near you guys in Pennsylvania not too long ago, maybe 2 years ago, where a guy wanted to take out an electrical substation and he attached like a thick or copper cable to the bottom of a DJI Phantom and was flying it into the electrical. You just had to short out the substation.
Yeah,
The drone crashed, so it didn't work, but it would have probably. So, I mean, I think that's why we have to take drone defense as seriously as we're taking the proactive use of this technology. But it's like anything else, right? This is why we can't have nice things, right?
that's the whole thing
People,
with CISA. CISA is all about that, right? We talk about critical infrastructure, and people don't also realize that taking a large piece of copper on a drone and shorting out a substation is not like, oh, ha ha ha, I did damage. The rest of the electrical system
yeah, it'll
can
cascade.
collapse.
Yeah.
and it cascades, and it can go all the way up to Canada, where everything shuts down, and one part of that chain is weak. It will take weeks, months, and that happened in Ukraine, where I think it was 6 months they lost their. Now I'm not saying a drone, but
Yeah.
the
But when
infrastructure
you lose
was
one node. Yeah.
compromised, and boom, 6 months I think.
Yeah, well, the other thing too, and we haven't talked, we've talked around it, but we haven't really talked about it decisively yet, is this Chinese drone ban that is happening right now.
Is
And
that for real? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it
just bought a
is.
drone that's
Yeah.
Chinese. I don't know.
Well, so here's the deal, and I've been involved at this at the highest levels. I was at the White House a couple of weeks ago talking about it. And what's happening is that the FCC has added. Uh, Originally, we thought it was just going to be Chinese drones. This happened like 2 days before Christmas, so everybody was like freaking out. So we knew that on December 23rd, that the FCC was going to add DJI and Autel, the two main Chinese drone companies, to the FCC covered list. What they did actually on the 22nd that nobody saw coming was they added all foreign drones to the covered list. And what the covered list does is it says you can't get new FCC licenses. And if you don't know anything about electronics, you need an FCC license if you've got any kind of wireless technology in there. So no new foreign drones will be able to get FCC licenses. Anything that currently has one is grandfathered in. So if you and anything that any model that has a current FCC license, so you could go buy a new version, I mean a new unit from an old line, right? So you can go buy a Mavic 5 or a Mavic 4, but there won't be a Mavic 5, right? So you could buy new Mavic
I see.
4s, but you can't buy Mavic 5s. So um, anything that's currently on the market, still good to go. Anything that's not on the market won't be able to get an FCC license. Now, of course, there is a waiver process because we have allies in Israel, Canada, and Taiwan, and South Korea and Japan who are making very capable drones. France, very capable drones that we want to be able to use here, but they have to go through a vetting process. It's not automatic, like, yeah, good to go. And so that's what's happened. You can still buy the existing stuff, but there won't be new models anymore. Um, now, so that's what's happening. Whether that's a good idea or not, I'll give you my opinion, which is, people, the sort of pro DJI crowd is like, hey, nobody's ever shown us evidence that data is getting back to China or that, all this stuff is leaking. And I'm told that there is evidence that it's classified. I haven't seen it. I don't have a security clearance, but uh, there hasn't been a lot of public information about it. What I will tell you is that whether or not it's leaking data back to China, if we do end up in a conflict with China, and let's say I were China and I had 2 million sensors flying around in my adversary's country, I'm damn well going to get in the back door and use those to my advantage. Not saying they're doing it now, but they could. And the other thing that's of concern to me is could they remotely brick them? So, if right now, like 90% of public safety agencies are using Chinese drones. And so if one day China decides, yeah, we don't want them to use those anymore, and they flip a switch and all those drones are bricked, that's going to put us at a disadvantage. Again, not saying they would do it, but they could potentially. We did it to John Deere tractors over in Russia. We remotely shut them down. So, it's yeah, I love DJI drones. They're great. They're inexpensive. They work great. But I also think that it's a national security risk at some level. I do appreciate that this administration said, "Hey, we're not going to take what you currently have because that would just be catastrophic, but we're going to stop we're going to stop the next generation." So
This,
that's what's
yeah,
going on.
this is very similar to like Hikvision and all the other Chinese NVR,
Yeah,
DVRs.
it's supply
Yeah,
chain risk. It's the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
as in cyber and in IT. Yeah,
not
it's
only
absolutely.
exact. Yeah,
yeah, not only can you get video and get surveillance, but you can use it as a backdoor because they're all P2Ps. They're all, so you have these peer-to-peer networks. So if you can go out, you can go in.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's what I've said too when I met with the White House, when I met with Congress, and I said to them, like, listen, I get it. We all want American-made stuff. This is a national security risk. Whether I've seen the data or not, there's a risk here. All I'm asking for is an off ramp, right? So you can't just shut it all down tomorrow and say, nope, nobody gets to use them anymore. And they handled it, I think, well, which is if you currently have it, we're not coming for it. We don't like the cat's out of the bag, right? If it's on the market now, we've approved it already. We understand that would be too big of a damage to the market, so you can keep buying it. in a year or two, that's not going to be the case, right? They're going to say, okay, everything that was grandfathered in is now obsolete. We're not letting new stuff in. You gotta stick with the American companies or allied countries companies that have gone through the vetting process. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, 5 years ago, the American drone industry was non-existent, right? Like the drones we had, we ceded that entirely to the Chinese. That is changing very, very rapidly. And there's a couple of really great American drone companies. They're more expensive, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But the capability is there. I hope the price will come down as well too. But the capability is there in a way that it wasn't a couple of years ago.
All right. Well, that is a great note, I think, to end on. That there is risk. There's the risk like in a lot of other places, but it seems like it's being approached somewhat rationally
Yes.
for a change. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. No.
All right.
Yeah. Really appreciate you guys having me. This has been a lot of fun.
No, Matt, thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. I know I have a lot more to learn. Hopefully I won't destroy too many drones because they're not that cheap in the process.
Sorry,
But
it sounds like Adam's going to give you some good instructions.
I'll just say this: I haven't really crashed a drone yet, but people that say they haven't crashed a drone yet are either one, not telling the truth, or two, they're lying. See number one. So, but I really
you
have.
know what? It's the same thing as dropping a motorcycle. Everyone who rides a bike has
Yeah.
dropped a bike.
Yeah.
I got news.
Yeah,
You
you're not
know.
a real drone. You're not a real drone pilot till you've crashed something.
But but I'm also very cautious when I
Oh,
fly. I'm not doing crazy things, and I
yeah.
just pretty much go up to a little bit. And I'm afraid being in New York City to do
Yeah.
certain things.
Yeah.
Well, your
So
street is like you're the only one who isn't a cop on your street too, right? You should be
yeah,
careful.
yeah. I've disclaimer. I might not or might have flown a drone, and my law enforcement neighbors have said, "What are you doing?" And then I basically purposely bumped into their windows a little bit, maybe, and they're like, "Again, it's Adam." But yeah, yeah. So some people believe get cheaper, inexpensive drones. So if you crash it, you don't lose a lot. I'm more like get the drones with the collision avoidance, get the
Yeah.
drones with the screens on them, get situational awareness. You see what's going on. Get audibles, wear a microphone, wear a headset. Shoot rockets in the air. I mean, I'm kidding, but the point I'm making is the more tools you have, the more capable you are of not crashing, which is why a lot of law enforcement agencies, you never hear about them really crashing because a lot of it is just command and control, point and go, point. It's the ways of flying a drone.
It's a tool, not a toy, and that's what I tell everybody. Then when we train them, and we say you got to treat this like any other tool. You're not going to get your brand new taser out and be like, "Hey, check this out." Like that's we don't do that. So if you want to go zip around at 60 miles an hour, go buy an FPV drone, do it on your own time. These drones, especially now that we're using American drones, these drones are not inexpensive. And I will say just real quickly, I think that's one of the worst parts of banning these Chinese drones is like they're inexpensive ones are great for training, and so I hope some company comes out with some cheap inexpensive drone that's got all the bells and whistles on, or got all the flying capability without all the expense. So just so we can get people the muscle memory and training on
I
these things. But
All
I
right,
own
Adam.
two of
We
those.
got a business right there.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
Let's
own
go.
two of those foreign drones, but I also have in my possession on loan an American
yeah,
drone,
yeah,
which is about probably 16 pounds.
yeah, yeah. So start small, practice a lot, treat it like a tool, not a toy. And those are
But
my parting words for you guys.
let's say for our audience, if anybody has any questions for Matt, reach out to us and we'll see if we can get them answered. And definitely a lot of really good information. And this is definitely the rage today. This is
Yeah,
what people are looking for.
yep,
It's
absolutely.
it's interesting. Matt, thanks again so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. We learned a
Yeah,
Thanks,
lot.
Matt.
thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.